they can check a box to say, I'm legally fine, but they're still tracking you in any shape or way.
The consumer, they don't have software to answer this until now. So the consumer has a monopoly in their own identity. So that's how they can charge for it. We split that evenly with our members, with the consumers.
Hey, weirdo, welcome back. Today, we're really tackling a big problem. How many times do you see that cookie banner? That little pop-up asking for your consent that has become constant, nagging presence in your digital lives? You click accept without thinking. Well, I don't, but most people do. Just to get that consent we want. But what are we really agreeing to? And is this the endless cycle of meaningless clicks the best we can do for privacy? What if a system was designed to work for you, not against you? What if you could set your privacy preferences once and have them respected across the entire internet? And what if you could actually get paid for the value your data creates? Today's guest has been working on these fundamental questions since the very beginning of the consumer internet. Is a technologist, an academic, and a serial entrepreneur. In 1995, he was one of the original developers of Match.com, writing the code that would help define online dating for decades to come. He went on to publish influential academic papers on the economics of spam, and later at Agari, he led the creation of email structure, a security protocol used by Google and Apple to authenticate brand logos in your inbox. Now, as the co-founder and CTO of Rewarded Interest, he's taking on one of the biggest challenges yet: to fix the broken economics of online privacy. His mission is to end consent fatigue and give customers a real strike in the data economy. Today, we're going to trace the arts of online identity from the Wild West of the 90s to the surveillance economy of today, and explore the new vision of a fairer and more transparent internet. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Cody. It's great to be here.
I just want to before we get anywhere, I just want to ask one fundamental question. What is the biggest, what's a truth in your industry people don't want to admit?
I think it probably makes some people in the world of ad tech uncomfortable that consumers are largely unaware that they are being tracked and targeted most of the time. And I think the whole industry in the last 20 years, and I'm relatively new to the industry, but of course I've been online using the internet for 3 decades now and then some. And I think the industry, at some point, they just said, well, that's kind of the way things are. And no one questioned it anymore. And the consumer's seat at the table, ability to see what's going on, kind of maybe some agency, the ability to do something about it, it just kind of got left by the wayside.
So can you tell me, let's go into that. What exactly does that look like for the average user?
Well, so the average user has more than, I think, 70% right now of consumers, at least on a laptop or a desktop, they use Chrome, the web browser. And many people use also Safari if they're on a Mac. And of course, there's Firefox and Edge. There's a large number of browsers out there, but really Chrome and Safari are kind of the heavy hitters. Mm-hmm. And by kind of default on Chrome, it supports a notion of a third-party cookie. And there's first-party cookies too and third-party cookies. In some ways under the law, they're treated in the same way. In some ways, they're different. But as you interact with websites, as you navigate your browser to a website, that website, the owner of that website, they want to know who you are. And the kind of the underlying problem that cookies or trackers aimed to solve originally was that with the original design of HTTP, which is the protocol that makes up the web, Hypertext Transport Protocol, it wasn't stateful. So it didn't remember when a browser visited even just a few seconds ago. So the browser sort of looks different. It's new, fresh. Oh, who's this? When in fact, it's the same person, you visiting over and over again and fetching resources from that web server. That's right. So it creates the perception from the user standpoint of like a connection with that website. And if you log in, then you stay logged in, right? And that's what cookies were designed for. But along the way, they got used for other things.
So if I'm not mistaken, it was like a big thing 10 years ago that these cookies needed to be tracked and that you needed to offer consent in order to actually get those cookies. What happened there? that become a tracking protocol?
So there may have been efforts before GDPR, but the general data protection regulations that came out that went into effect in Europe, I believe in 2018, and another one called e-privacy directive, which I think preceded it actually. They together created, at least in Europe, and then adopted later, a requirement that the tracking that could be done and the storage of a small amount of information in a user's web browser, which it would then automatically kind of spit back to whoever said it, that got enacted. And that was about 9 years ago. I wish I knew more about the kind of the beginnings of that, but that's when consumers really started to get the awareness that this was even going on.
Yeah, being an early internet user, I always knew, and a software developer, I knew that how it was being tracked and stuff. I just didn't until recently realize that it was actually like none of these things actually matter and it's going to happen anyways. And they're basically, these banners are just clickbait so that they can check a box to say, I'm legally fine, but they're still tracking you in any shape or way. So how does your company solve that?
Well, so great that you raise the notion and the scourge of cookie banners. Cookie banners, cookie consent banners, sometimes they're called cookie pop-ups, depending. They're often rise from the bottom of the page. They get in your face and they ask you to do something. They ask you to consent or not. And there's all kinds of dark patterns, which you're probably familiar with, where the shiny red button or the shiny green button is the one that is maybe the most attractive, or it's simply the one that's most prominent. So a user is motivated to just get this thing out of the way. And as a result, they don't dig in. They don't carefully consider what their privacy choices are. And the fact that it has to be done on every single website that you go to, more in Europe, probably quite a bit in Canada, and it's coming in the US. Maybe 30-40% of websites in the US have this problem. So what do we do? Well, that experience that a lot of consumers have, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of consumers, it uses up a lot of time. And because we've gotten used to just dismissing these things or pushing them aside as quickly as possible, that consent fatigue, as it's called, reduces a consumer's control, or it reduces, in some ways, it kind of reduces their ability to exercise their rights. Not to mention it's a pain in the butt. So we think of it as adding potentially 3-4 hours a year to most consumers' life if they spend a lot of time online. So you can see where I'm going. What our extension and privacy tool does, it's an extension for Chrome. We'll have iOS, mobile Safari in about maybe 3 months out there. Anyone who wants to be in a pilot, let me know. It automatically detects those consent banners, they're called dialogues sometimes in the industry. And we either prevent them from loading outright, or we allow them to load, and then we interact with them. Our software talks to their software to say, this is what the consumer's choices are on this site. And it might go more than that. It might say, here are the mechanisms that can be used for tracking. It could say, using a tracking mechanism, you are allowed and authorized to do the following reduced set of things. And we can get very granular with that. But the main value proposition for a consumer is you no longer have to interact with these cookie banners every time you see them. They are gone. Our browser fills them out, or our extension fills them out. And the other thing is you can actually have some confidence that your privacy choices are going to be respected, because we enforce them and we also express them to the other kind of parties whose code is present on those pages. And we do that through standards.
I like how you're doing that, because I get those banners all the time. And not only that, they themselves are stateless. So sometimes I'm on a website and every single page I go to has a different consent button. I'm like, this makes no sense. Why would I use your website if I have to consent everywhere in order to use it? How you also pay your users for this privacy? How does that work?
Well, so I'll say that we have a 2-phased product launch.
Okay.
And so in the near term, and this has to do with critical mass. So if you're familiar with the notion of a 2-sided network. So in a 2-sided network, you have buyers and sellers of some good. And consumers they would like compensation if they're going to be tracked and targeted. They also want privacy and convenience. Also, 2 more important things. they're kind of heavyweight words, but transparency, the ability to see what's going on, and agency, the ability to do something about it, right? And we think of like the agency as like having a seat at the table, and giving a platform provides a way for consumers to have bargaining power. And that has to do now, let me talk about the other side of our marketplace, or our two-sided market, two-sided network. The advertisers, and these are both brands and the infrastructure that brands use to place ads. They desperately want both permission to track and target, and they want an identity, really just a way to identify a consumer at the moment they attempt to deliver a personalized ad. And without those two things, they can't personalize ads. And it turns out personalized ads, not surprisingly, do much better than non-personalized ads, because the ad might actually be relevant to something that you're interested in market for, or maybe never thought about that might be a fit. And some clever marketer somewhere figured out that you might actually want their product. And in general, this is great for consumers, because nobody wants untargeted marketing. It's way worse. And it's great for advertisers who maybe are trying to get a new product and service out there, or trying to increase their sales. And they'll create incentives to do it. Back to the payment thing, by the way. That was a very long-winded answer. So maybe you want me to finish that first?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay,
yep.
Great. So the way our model works is, when a consumer is part of they use our platform, they can opt in to having us essentially represent them, almost like collective bargaining. We're saying, okay, consumers, if you want, we will sell the ability to target you in the context of delivering an ad to all these advertising platforms. And when those ad platforms use the identity, they have to pay us, and we turn around and we pay the consumer.
I like the idea. You're like a union for the basic people.
That's where the pool comes in.
Yeah.
When the audience gets big enough, like the people who would otherwise exploit that audience, they've got to pay. And yeah.
I do like how you're putting into perspective, though, that the majority from what I understood from that a lot of people actually don't want to go to these dark data brokers that have all the data that they've stolen from everybody. They actually want to have permission data, and that it's not for a lack of not trying, it's for a lack of not having that infrastructure already built out. I appreciate that that's the take on a lot of things, because for the longest time as a social media user, you felt hand-tied, like your data is not your own, which comes into a lot of problems when you start creating content online. Do you expect to have competition coming up?
We do. And I don't know when. If we're successful and we have a golden goose, we will get fast followers. And realistically, this is a big business. Ad tech is $600 billion a year business, depending on whose stats you get and when they were formulated. And not all of that, in fact, of only really a tiny fraction of that has anything to do with consumer data. And we figured out there's consumer identity, or data is more or less of a commodity. But identity, that ability to identify the consumer at the last second, that actually is not a commodity. And when users use our product, we block all of the other forms of identity that somebody might use to identify that consumer. So the consumer has a monopoly in their own identity. So that's how they can charge for it. Otherwise, the ad tech universe would be happy to just track and target the person for free. So we have to get rid of those other ways to identify the consumer in order to give that consumer that bargaining power that they deserve.
Fair enough. So I just want to get into one more thing on your company. Where do you want to take this?
So I think in the short term, and I was alluding to this when I was talking about the two sides of the market. So until we can deliver on rewards, in order to deliver on rewards, we need a large enough pool of people that the demand side platforms that represent the ad buying demand coming from the advertisers, they need a large enough pool. Might be 50,000, might be 100,000, might be 200,000. So we have to get to that critical mass. Now, once we have that critical mass, the advertisers and the demand side platforms look at it like this. Oh, wait, you've got 250,000 people, or 10 million people, whatever it is, and I can't see those people anymore. I can't target them with a personalized ad. And you've taken away all the other IDs. Yeah, I'm going to buy your ID because I want to deliver my ads. So, but we've got to get to that critical mass. So we can't deliver on rewards until we have enough consumers. Before we are able to do that, we have a compatible value proposition. And that is, if you're tired of clicking on cookie banners, we make that problem go away. If you want more, let's say, confidence that your privacy preferences are going to be respected, we make that happen as well. Right? So it's set your privacy choices once, the web obeys. Go straight to the content.
I'm downloading it purely for that because half my day is just going to be click this to get out of the way. It's also why I leave my computer running. I typical things I wouldn't normally do because it's just easier to let things happen than it is to keep on doing the clicking.
Yeah.
Is there something I'm missing in regards to this? I feel like this is kind of like a revolutionary tech in terms of what it can do. And actually, I'm surprised ad tech is allowing you to wipe out people's credentials elsewhere. What do you worry that you're not going to go very far with this?
I think we have a chasm to cross or a hurdle to jump over in the short term here, which is we've got to get to that critical mass. And we have an idea of how much media we can buy. In other words, we can buy ads to show people what we're doing. And right now, the trouble is awareness. Nobody knows we exist. And thankfully, you are helping with that. But am I worried about it in the long run? I mean, not really. And here's why. If a large pool of consumers, which we plan to bring into our fold and deliver value to, if they use something like rewarded interest, then everybody in the value chain, if you're familiar with that idea, from advertiser down to consumer, everybody does better.
Yeah.
And that means they actually make more money for the people who are worried about the money making. Even the consumers make more money. Today, they get targeted and tracked and get nothing. But with us, they will get targeted, tracked if they opt in, and they'll get compensated. So the consumer makes more money. And the reason for this is providing that targeting, the ability to identify a user at the time an ad is delivered, can increase the value of that ad by 50%. So it is significant. So publishers a lot of online publishers, they generate their revenue through ads. And so if a rewarded interest user shows up on their website, they're now going to get consent and they're going to make more money. The supply side platforms that advertiser uses, the publisher, what they use, they take a percentage of the revenue. So they're going to make more money. And then the demand side platform and the advertiser, same kind of thing. Advertisers have their marketing dollars go further to reach the right people with the right message. So they do better. And then the DSPs sell ads at a higher price point. So they do better. So on the whole, no. In fact, when we've talked to publishers, they're like, we love this. When we've talked to demand platforms, they're like, we're going to buy your ID. And advertisers like the idea of a better return on their ad spend.
My thing with this is you've got privacy, you've got consent, you've got transparency, you've got everything that most people need. Now it's just the visibility. And yes, I'm going to make sure everything's down below. And I highly suggest anybody does this because right now we have no power over our data. And to get even just to not get paid for it, but to actually have consent representative of what you want is something that I think the world needs. And especially with bots and AI coming. Do you anticipate this is also going to help that once we start having? And then I do have one more question on that. I'm trying to figure out, because to me, the personal identifier has to come down. I don't think you're going to be able to do it without a blockchain structure. So are you working on something with blockchain to do that? Or are you hoping to work with a traditional application to build this?
No, so I mean, are you talking about for agentic, or are you just talking about for rewarded interest for the monetization?
For agentic,
for agentic,
trying to point out identity in an agentic world more than anything else.
Well, so we're planning to do this now. So think of it like this: you give your chatbot or your agentic browser a question, and let's say it's guiding your browser, and the browser is starting to surf. And the publishers out there, providers of data that might answer questions back to your agent running in the browser, your agent in the browser may share your prompt. It may share other data that you have already given it. And that stuff is all personal data. So privacy and consent matters in that context. So we are going to ask our consumers, hey, how do you feel about an agent disclosing your data? Can they use in that context? Or do you want to have a different? So in theory, we could mint out a different ID and hand that to the user's chatbot or their agent. And as that agent goes off and does things, it's that, not the consumer. That solves actually some liability issues that the chatbot makers might have as well, which is, do they really want to be representing the consumer or themselves in those dialogues? No, they probably want a third party who's saying, oh, by the way, this is this identity right now. It's not open that's actually doing this surfing and consenting to the data sharing. That's a problem.
That's very fair, and I appreciate that you've looked into this. And I didn't even clue into your prompts are your personal data. And to anybody, to our audience out there, protect those. I'm seeing in the industry, especially in the movie industry, people are starting to ramp up on creating motion pictures and stuff, and companies are asking for the prompts. Do not give them the prompts. Those are your proprietary information, regardless of how you built them. They are yours. So yeah, like that's a big thing for me.
Prompt is like a prompt to make a film is a recipe for the film. It's like a spec or a script. So it's copywritten, should be copyrightable material. Yeah.
Oh, and I can just see how open. Oh, you're going to sending me into a whole spiral into that whole area that I'm already looking into. So we just have our last 5 minutes. I want to give you a chance to plug yourself, plug where you're going, who you are, or where you're at, so that I can send people there. Because this is definitely something I'm downloading.
Great. Awesome. Well, so I wanted to speak briefly about transparency, and then I want to talk about global privacy control. It's a new feature we just added. So in essence, by the way, and I'll add some detail here on our business model. So when the advertiser through their platform buys an ad, in other words, they buy the right to show their creative in the context of a web page or underneath a YouTube video, or it's a post pre-roll video or whatever it is, we charge those advertising platforms 10% of, it's called a media fee, and it's 10% of their purchase price. We split that evenly with our members, with the consumers. And so that's our take, and sort of, it's like a transaction fee. We're making this happen on our platform, and so that's how we get paid.
Yep.
But our business model is on transparency. Our business model is public. I just shared it. And we're clear about how we make money. And we think that is different from the way most ad tech platforms or all of those companies that are out there, the ones in Silicon Valley you've heard of, they don't operate that way. It's sort of, we show how the sausage is made. So another important point about using our product is you can take time to be deliberate about your consent choices, because you're not getting interrupted as you're going towards something, trying to get something or read an article or whatever it is. That's a terrible time to ask a consumer to be informed, because they're in the middle of something else. Yep. So when you install our product, we take some pains to kind of walk you through the setup, and you can always go back to it and make edits about what your policy is, and you can spend the time to read what these choices do. And so we feel that's an important way for consumers to really be informed, and then to do informed consent.
Yeah, and that is one thing that I forgot to touch on. I appreciate that you're dumbing it down, for lack of a better words, because the consent forms are also, I've gone through them, and some of them get very legal very fast. And it's like, if I know what I'm looking for, and I'm just like, I don't want you to have any of my data, so off. But for those who actually want to get tracked in that way, because there are certain functionalities I no longer get because I turn those things off too. It's just a matter of understanding them. And I think that's a big part of the internet right now, is trying to understand what you're doing all the time.
Yeah.
And that's a big load for a lot of people.
The time shift is important. It's allowing a person to consider those options more carefully and to understand them, but then not have to bear that burden every time they visit a website. So there's a phrase that's sometimes used for this, which is automation asymmetry, right? So the publisher whose website you're visiting, they've got software to sit there and nag you to get this consent. But the consumer, like, they don't have software to answer this until now. And so the burden was just kind of shoved on the consumer. Oh, yeah, you can be informed. Here, read a 20-page legalese document because here's what we're going to do, right? Not fair, right? So in that sense, we're trying to be an equalizer for the consumer. Right? We represent the consumer's interests. We do it with software, and we dramatically cut that automation asymmetry.
I appreciate it, and I hope everybody else does too. Where can people reach you?
They can find us online at rewardedinterest.com. And we're available in the Chrome Web Store. So if you just go to the Chrome Store, which is where you find all the extensions, Chrome Web Store, you just type in rewarded and we should pop up as one of the search hits. We have a green and black logo. And so I should say a couple things we aren't. We're not an ad blocker. We don't pay people to watch ads. And we do not remove privacy protections. If anything, we make them stronger.
Perfect.
And then I should mention also one other thing. Scott Spencer, who is my co-founder, he helped build Google's AdX. That is the ad exchange that has been the subject of a monopoly finding not too long ago. And he built that when he was at another company called DoubleClick that Google then acquired. And I think part of his mission, which is how he and I found each other and aligned, is this is his baby in some ways. Programmatic advertising, real-time bidding, these things are some of the things that he had a hand in creating. And I think he felt, okay, so at some point in time, it kind of went off in a direction that it didn't make him feel good. So he's come back to this and said, okay, if we empower consumers with the right tooling and the right software, we may be able to make the whole ecosystem better and make consumers better off. And that's kind of how that's why he and I hit it off.
I appreciate that take. And I also just want to ask one last question. Do you expect there to be a wave of engineers that feel that way? I know it's a big question.
Yeah, could you characterize the question a little bit?
So do you expect more software engineers to be like your business partner, to have a baby that they've built and just have now walked away and said, okay, I want to build it properly?
I think that is a common thing among many great engineers. And that is, learn how to do things, you have skills, you have perspective, and you put your heart and soul into the things that you're building. And so you want them to be used. You want them to create value and to make humanity better off. And I think that feeling is one that resonates with most great engineers.
Fair enough. Thank you very much. Because that's why I left. I just was done with what my software was doing for others. And I just was like, I can't do it anymore. I want to build something that's for people instead of that takes away from people. So awesome, I appreciate it. And to everybody out there, thank you very much for listening. And if you need anything, please reach out.